Welcome to Sincast, presented by Cinemasins.
Welcome to the Sincast. This is Chris Atkinson from Cinemasins, alongside Jeremy Scott, the voice of Cinemasins, and Barrett Scher, writer of music video sins, and his partner in crime, Jay Lalonde, also from music video sins. And we are all together for the first time, but not really, as we are all speaking over the internet in various rooms of our houses and whatever we're. Today what we're going to talk about, we're going to go into Quentin Tarantino and the Hateful Eight, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Maybe Jay, since we haven't heard from Jay before, why don't we go into Hateful Eight, just start talking about it, man.
I love it. And nice, too. This is a all-hands meeting here. A lot of people don't realize none of us have ever seen each other. And it's nice to be talking with you guys. I really like this film. It's definitely not Tarantino's best film, but I love the way it was directed, obviously, and then shot like a play. And then Jennifer Jason Leigh is a beastly woman in it, and that's my kind of gal, you know. I thought it was 20 minutes, a little too long, and a little indulgent, but, I mean, it's a Tarantino film, so I'm just going to go with it. As a former East Tennessean, I'm going to celebrate the dude, and I love everything he does, dude. He's amazing.
Yeah, I really like this too. I'm the same way about it. You know, Tarantino has gotten to the point where he's made so many great movies that once he comes out with something that's below that, you kind of start feeling disappointed, even though you shouldn't be. And this is a really good movie. This is one that's got, you know, I mean, like you said, Jennifer Jason Leigh is great in it, and Walton Goggins, who I believe almost everybody feels steals the movie. Is really good in it. I agree with you on the length too. I think where that probably could have gotten trimmed was at the beginning, where it's Kurt Russell and Jennifer Jason Leigh and Walton Goggins and all them going to the place. That takes forever, and you know you don't know where you're quite going. There's some great things in it, but yeah, that's where I think that's just a minor nitpick.
No, it's interesting that you actually mentioned that first part, because that first part was one of my favorite parts, pretty much for the reason that you were saying. I like how all the pieces are fitting together, but very deliberately. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we wander upon, and he even makes a note of it. Kurt Russell saying, you know, what are the odds that there's another guy in a blizzard wandering around in my path, you know?
Right.
So and that's some of the funnest dialogue. Matter of fact, when I started watching that, it was like, you ever had a food that you forget how good it is? Like for me, it's like hot wings. Like when I eat hot wings, I remember, hey, that's really good food. And like when I heard that dialogue at the beginning, I was like, and we'll keep all this stuff spoiler free for Jeremy and for everybody. But at the beginning, that dialogue was like, God damn it. Like, I really love Quentin Tarantino movies. You know?
Yeah.
And now it kind of reminded me of that. And of course, it goes into a whole other universe when they get to the haberdashery and everything. But yeah, I really like that part of it.
Well, and I don't mean to impugn it, but I think it's good.
You impugned.
I think it's good. I just think it's just a little bit on the long side considering where we're going, where the movie's going to end up. But I agree with you. There's a lot of great stuff in it, the dialogue and all that. Movie is super violent.
He's gotten into the blood porn, it looks like, you know, from between Django and this. He's really looking to see how much liquid can come out of a chest upon impact of a bullet.
Yeah,
get away with.
And it's weird that he puts you through the motions, because Jennifer Jason Leigh, as great as she is, her character is reprehensible, but she's also getting destroyed by Kurt Russell in this movie. And it's like I have this is probably the point, but I have really divided feelings on this whole thing. Because you're sitting there going, yeah, she's kind of a bitch, but I don't know if she deserves to get punched as hard as she does all the way through this movie. The interesting thing about Tarantino is there's always something else going on, and with Kurt Russell's presence in it, it was hard not to think of the movie The Thing during it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Thing, but it's another one where you have people who are trapped in in one location. It's snowy. And there is, a quote unquote demon or something that's going on. And in this case, it's the mysterious killer or whatever it is that is threatening their lives while they're inside of it. So there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of parallels you can draw to The Thing in this. And that's another interesting way to look at it. And the other way to look at it is Agatha Christie's 10 Little Indians. Yeah. There's another one that kept coming to mind while I was watching it. People who are all invited to one spot, and again, they have to stay in this one place, but there's this, mysterious killer that's going around. And so that's the thing that I like about Tarantino movies is it's not always just what you see. There's a lot of subtext. What
the general consensus is on this, between this and his last film, Django Unchained, is that he's into Westerns now, and he's only filming Westerns. And this is a Western, but this is not a Western. This is, it goes between genres very seamlessly, between mystery and like action and like Western and like revenge. And like, it's not pigeonholed into one specific thing. And even when you think it's going to like settle into this 3-act type of mystery like an Agatha Christie play or something like that, it goes off the chains and it goes into something else, and they go to maybe a flashback or something like that.
Yeah.
Don't you guys feel like Samuel L. is just a guarantee? I know he's had some shitty movies, but I there's so much trust I have in him. As soon as I see him, it's immediate. It's like, like if he called me a motherfucker, I would actually believe him. I'd be like, he might be right. He might, so. And then he, of course, recently made the news with what he was saying, like Donald Trump or whatever cheats in golf. I totally believe him in everything Samuel L. says on and off screen. He's just, I think, the only guarantee out there.
I obviously love Samuel L. Jackson. I think more when he's in a Tarantino or he's in a Spike Lee movie than any other type of thing, because he's always elevated in those movies. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you look at the IMDb, Samuel Jackson's been in I think 200 movies. I think he's got a credit for about 200 movies, and that's not exaggeration. He's in, so not all the time does his presence mean something for me, but in a Tarantino or a Spike Lee movie, for sure.
I think we talked about this before, Chris, recently, but there's something about Tarantino that brings something extra out of Samuel L. I don't get that presence and trust in the Marvel movies when he shows up, right?
Yeah, it's almost the opposite, in fact. It's almost the opposite.
Right. I get the credit card commercial Samuel L. in those movies, but when he's in a Tarantino film, he goes to up 2 or 3 levels.
Yeah. But even then, I feel like when he's doing a credit card commercial or those types of films, he's like looking at me as a viewer and he's saying, "Dude, I'm just getting paid. Go with me on this one. I'll see you around the corner in another Tarantino film." And I'm just like, "Cool, I got you, man. Get paid."
Well, and speaking of another guy who has only been nominated one time, Pulp Fiction is his only nomination. Well, actually, no, he got nominated for Django, didn't he? I'm not sure about that. I don't have that in front of me, but he's only been nominated a couple of times. And he's another beloved actor.
Should he have been nominated for this?
Well, it's weird, right? Only Jennifer Jason Leigh got nominated out of this group. Walton Goggins, who everybody raves about,
He's terrific.
Is not nominated at all.
Yeah,
Actually, and I'm looking it up now, and Samuel Jackson was only nominated for Pulp Fiction. He hasn't been nominated for anything else, which is amazing because he is great in every Tarantino movie. He's great in Jackie Brown. He's great in Django. He's great in this. But you're talking about Jennifer Jason Leigh getting nominated. This reminds me a little bit of and this is sort of off track. I don't want to get it totally off track, but it sort of reminds me of The Departed, where Mark Wahlberg was the only one that got nominated out of The Departed.
Yeah.
So anyway,
wherever it's expedient, I guess. Yeah, that's a surprise because I liked her performance as much as anybody. But yeah, I thought Samuel L. Jackson and Walton Goggins and I think Tim Roth should win like every award ever because I just love him.
Yeah, I think Tim Roth's great in this too, and a lot of people, I guess, are thinking, well, that was probably Christoph Waltz's character at one point or whatever. But
yeah.
Tim Roth does it. I mean, I didn't really sit there and think, man, I wish Christoph Waltz was in this because Tim Roth is awesome.
No, yeah, I don't think so because if you watch all the Tarantino and kind of off-brand Tarantino films, like you see Tim Roth do every version of Tim Roth that he has done in a Tarantino film. You know, he did like, you know what I mean? Like he does the tough guy act from like Reservoir Dogs, and he does the Cockney from Pulp Fiction, and then he does the very proper British gentleman thing, which is actually you see in Four Rooms.
Right.
Had a vignette that was directed by Tarantino.
Yeah.
And so he kind of goes between all those things in this performance.
Yeah. But, I mean, I guess this could be a good forum here to talk about Tarantino movies in general. And Jeremy and I talk about Jackie Brown a lot. I'll since Jeremy hasn't had a chance to really get in on this, talk about Jackie Brown a little bit because we both love that movie.
Oh, man. It's by far my favorite Tarantino film. And I would probably argue with people that disagreed that it's his best. And one of the reasons I love it, I think, is that it's one of the only times Tarantino's dealing with somebody else's source material. And I haven't ever read the Elmore Leonard novel that it's based on, but I understand he made plenty of changes. But still, when he has his own unique original idea, that I think is where we get all the Tarantino excess that, you know, I think true Tarantino fans love that. But for me, it's always a little bit too much. Like, you look at something like Kill Bill, where he does that cartoon segment with the girl in the bedroom and all the fucking blood. And that's the kind of thing that will keep me from putting that movie in and watching it over and over again. Even though, I mean, I guess I feel like it's more to make a point than it is to be part of my entertainment or enjoyment of the film. And in Jackie Brown, I don't get as much of that excess. I feel like maybe he was reined in a little bit because he had, you know, this pre-existing story. And man, I can watch that movie every day for the rest of my life. It's just such an easygoing, interesting, full of complex, weird-ass characters. And it's this mystery. I don't even like all the performances in it, but it's by far my favorite Tarantino movie.
And isn't that interesting, too, that, you know, Jackie Brown is a fairly violent movie, but there's not a lot of, like, let's show the blood splatter all over the place
Right.
type of stuff. You know, almost everybody who gets shot on screen or is off screen or whatever, but there's not, you know, this whole idea that we need to show how bloody it is or whatever. We get the point. Jackie Brown for me is just I just love how they just keep going to all these different perspectives. And this was what Tarantino was basically known for after Pulp Fiction, you know, doing the different perspective of stories. But Jackie Brown, he takes it to another level, where he just keeps going to each character's perspective, and it changes your idea of what was going on each time, and it's I just love it just for that, just how, you know, even though we're seeing the same events going on over and over towards the end, it's always entertaining.
Well, and one of my favorite little movie trivia things is that Michael Keaton is playing the same character here that he plays in Out of Sight, which is
Ray Nicolette.
Yeah, which is also based on an Elmore Leonard novel, and we could do a whole podcast on Out of Sight because it's in my top 10 movies of all time. But but yeah, he's great. Samuel L. Jackson is probably my favorite thing, and Jay will probably chime in here about looking into his soul.
Yeah, it's true. Well, not just Samuel L. and Jackie Brown, but Pam Grier as well. You know, like I quite fancy her in those, like, if you remember that flight attendant outfit she wore with those giant shoulder pads. She looks like she's like ready for the Super Bowl, you know, and those giant shoulder pads. It's worth a look. It's worth a Google image, guys, is what I'm saying.
This is the filthiest podcast we've ever done.
Yes, absolutely. It won't be the last, I'm sure.
Anyway, what I'm saying is she could play a linebacker with these shoulder pads, and she was just I think such an underrated actress, and still is today. You know, so I agree. Jackie Brown's one of his best films, and definitely one of the most underrated Tarantino films.
And also, I love it when Tarantino ends up using an actress that he referred to in an earlier movie, where, you know, Reservoir Dogs, they're having that movie conversation about Pam Grier and all that. And then later on, Pam Grier is in one of his movies. Yeah. I always love stuff like that.
I mean, I think, you know, people would be interested at least to know where we go after Jackie Brown, since I don't think the average Tarantino fan would pick Jackie Brown as their favorite. Most of them are going to pick Pulp Fiction, which would probably be my second favorite. But, man, every time I watch that first scene in Inglourious Bastards, I want to shove that movie to the top of the list, because that is just a glorious scene.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's Tarantino at his very, very best, that opening scene of that movie.
Yeah.
And then he continues it later on when the Melanie Laurent character is, you know, having coffee with him later. Right. And there's so much to that scene, you know, him putting the cream in her coffee, and she's Jewish and she can't drink it because she's Jewish, but, you know, he's sort of like feeling her out and trying to figure out if she's the one that got away and all this other stuff. You know, Inglourious Bastards is another great movie, but it's also another movie that just like ridiculously violent.
Right.
But you know, overall, I mean, yeah, I agree. I'd have to put it up there as well.
That's an example of that Jeremy was just talking about of Tarantino going off on excess, because with the reined in director or writer on that, I think it could be tighter, and I think it could probably be better, because the best moments in there are some of his best moments ever.
Well, yeah, and I don't look at it, Inglourious Bastards, and remember fondly the way over the top murder of, you know, Hitler, right? Like that's super excessive and way over the top. And I remember that movie for its little moments, like Chris was saying, in the coffee shop, and then in that opening scene, the intimate. And then even when he grabs Brad Pitt and they have that conversation in the side room and he's sort of interrogating him, I mean, those are the moments that are the best thing about that film to me.
Well, and the Fassbender thing where he holds up the wrong amount of fingers and all that. Such a, you know, the way he builds that scene up too. There's absolutely nothing in that scene where you're thinking this is going to end up being violent. And it's just, you know, it's them playing the little game with the cards on their heads and all this other type of stuff. And you're like, okay, this is just going on normally. They're just going to they're just going to go to the next thing. And that's what they're going to do and whatever. And then suddenly you have a guy who's just in the back of the room somewhere who inserts himself into this thing. And you're like, uh-oh. They're gonna. This started to get a little bit more tense, and he builds that beautifully.
Yeah, he's great at that.
Well, per Jeremy's question, what's the next thing he does? I mean, it's yet to be seen, right? Like, I might be interested in seeing him take a step back from any of the violent movies per se, and what if Tarantino goes back to like writing a romance or something like that? And,
well, the problem is that he's been pretty vocal lately about only planning to make 10 movies total in his career, and he's coming up on that. So,
well, and that also reminds me of, I probably told Jeremy and Barrett this at some point, I'm not sure, but I remember, I'm a big, huge fan of Death Proof. And and Death Proof is another movie that I feel like gets a little bit cast aside, much like Jackie Brown does. I've watched Death Proof probably 10 times. It's just one of those movies that I can watch anywhere it's at in the movie, I can watch it. the thing is that I watched it one day and I looked it up, and I was just looking at stuff about Death Proof, and there was this headline that said, Tarantino says Death Proof's got to be the worst movie I've ever made. And I'm like, that's weird. It's when you love a movie and the creator comes out and says that he hates it. So I went and delved into it, and I found out that he said this, and it's completely out of context. And this is why you should never trust anything that you read on the internet ever. He's in an interview with a whole bunch of directors. It's like David O. Russell and the guy who did Les Miserables and a whole bunch of people like that. And like, there's a point where he says, and this goes back to the amount of movies he wants to make and all that other type of stuff. He says, I want to get to the point where I don't want to get to where I'm too old to make a good movie. You see some of the older directors now, and they try to make movies and they're not very good. And he says, at the end of my career, Death Proof's got to be the worst movie that I've made. Basically saying, Death Proof is not a bad movie. It's just that it's got to be the bar for his worst movie. And that is just something that I realized, it's more of an internet thing. It's more of a don't believe the headlines you read type of thing. And I'm sure he holds Death Proof in some high regard. He just doesn't put it where his other movies are. But I do. I put it above. I put it probably third or fourth. It's just one of those movies that I love watching. It does sort of falter a little bit in the second half of it. The first half is almost perfect to me. But it's a movie that's just the dialogue, you just get wrapped up in it the entire time. I love it.
It's definitely underrated. And I thought the Kill Bill movies were overrated. Overall. I mean, they were fun, especially part 2, but strangely enough, and this is not a spoiler, I actually thought it was him doing the voiceover in Hateful Eight, right?
I'm actually not sure about that. I'd have to look it up.
I'm pretty sure it was. And it was actually for the first time, maybe. And I'm saying this because his appearance in Django Unchained at the very end was so jarring and shitty that it was such a 180 in this to just hear his voice and like him actually be helpful and like restrained. And I thought it was real nice, actually.
Yeah, he is the uncredited narrator. You're talking, it's funny. You mentioned the thing about Tarantino. In Inglourious Bastards, he wanted to play Aldo Rain at one point, and like there's the part at the very end. This is something that I read in a Cracked article. That if you imagine him being Aldo Rain at the end of the movie, where he's like, "This is going to be my masterpiece," and then it just goes to a film by Quentin Tarantino after that. It's about as unsufferable as it gets.
Oh my God!
That movie. I think Tarantino probably stood back and realized I was going to ruin the movie if I was Aldo Rain.
Can I just mention one more thing? And we may not even want to go there. I kind of want to go there. It just came up after watching Hateful Eight. Is it how obsessed with the N-word this guy is?
Yeah.
And it's just, and I actually kind of did some backstory on it. It was interesting that you mentioned that the only two directors that can get the best out of Samuel L. Jackson is Spike Lee and Tarantino, because they've had this feud going on since like 1994.
Right. Like well, and as an insert there, I don't know if you remember, Tarantino also did rewrites on Crimson Tide.
Yeah.
And when he got on, Tarantino visited the set, and Denzel Washington was like, "What is it with that, by the way? What is it?"
In front of everybody, apparently, too.
Yeah, exactly. And, here's a guy, I think that, the use of that word is just that it's excessive. It's not that he's not allowed to put it in his art. I don't think that's what we're trying to say here. I think that he just, especially with Django and Hateful Eight, since he's in the era, it's like, I've got license to say that. That's the way people were back then.
But then what about Pulp Fiction and Jackie Brown? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but then, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, and even Reservoir Dogs to some extent, he goes over the board, over the line on that too. And it's just especially his character in Pulp Fiction. I just don't think I just don't think any white guy would ever tell a black guy the stuff that Quentin Tarantino does in Pulp Fiction. It's just not believable at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But you are right. He is obsessed with it. And I think after he got, he got a little torched over it for Pulp Fiction. I think he said, well, you know what, this is art, and I'm just gonna go ahead to go back now would mean to say that I was wrong. So now I'm just gonna.
It's like, 99.99% of movies in the universe can make movies without uttering this word, but like it's like I don't know if he's making period pieces just to be able to insert it or whatever, but like it's like, come on, I don't know. I guess you'd expect it and everything in Hateful Eight, but it's
exactly what you're talking about though. It is because we're in that era. I have a license to do that, and I'm going to do it as much as possible. And who knows? I don't know if people back then said it that much. But seriously, you could cut it down just a little bit and we'd get the idea.
I think everybody gets one in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. You don't need 500 uses of
it. They should have the Cinemasins ding pop up once it's all over. Once he hits his quota. That's it.
Yeah. We'd have to figure out what the quota is and then move on. Like you said, every character says it. Then we go, all right, there's the ding.
Yeah, apparently there's something like 68 in this, and somewhere around, or maybe it was 68 for Django Unchained and like 39 in Jackie Brown. Like somebody actually went back and counted all these things up, which must have been an insufferable task. But
yeah.
I remember before Cinemasins, when I was cutting together that Pulp Fiction, just the cussing edit. And I was basically trying to leave in anything that would get censored on television and be considered a swear in that environment. But I actually caught heat from people in the comments about including the N-word along with the swear words. Like, that's not a swear word. I'm like, what? I kind of think it is. Anyway.
Yeah, well, it doesn't that word sort of, it's different from a swear word in that I'm trying to think of this the other day actually, and I don't want to go too far into it because, but it seems like it is different from a normal swear word. It's weird to me that stuff like, on Chappelle's show, you could hear it a bunch, but now they censor it. And they'll censor it during the day, but they won't censor it at night. It's kind of a weird, it's a weird thing. There's a delicate relationship with that word where it's worse than a swear word almost.
Yeah.
Especially in the hands of a non-African American person.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Just four white guys talking about the N-word.
That's it.
That's right. That's all we were doing.
That's the new name of the podcast, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the N-word.
Welcome everybody to the N-word.
Yes.
Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, Barrett Scher, Jay Lalonde. N-word. Come see us every Monday.
Can I have one more? I think in your vein of the Death Proof being underrated and everything, where do we stand on From Dusk Till Dawn? Because it was essentially one half of a Tarantino movie, right?
Well, he wrote the script, and Robert Rodriguez directed it. But
that first half is all Tarantino.
First
right?
half, yeah. The first half is more Tarantino than the actiony second half for sure. But I think Tarantino's the only credited screenwriter. I'm not sure about that. But yeah, that is. I love From Dusk Till Dawn. It's just one of those. It's one of those movies that's really fun.
It is.
And I like the smart dialogue about vampires and stuff. Where George Clooney's like, I don't want to hear anything about I don't believe in vampires because I don't fucking believe in vampires, but I know what I just saw. That type of thing. And so I love that type of thing in it, and it's just a fun movie. It's just that first half, like you said, there's that, oh, it's very Tarantino, and then the second half is just nothing. It's just nothing but blowing up zombies, and it's got a lot of great, character actors like, Fred Williamson and Tom Savini, and it's just a perfect B movie.
Introducing Ernest Liu.
Yeah, Ernest Liu, indeed. It is also, whenever From Dusk Till Dawn comes up, it is also the worst film disaster I ever had to deal with as a projectionist. So I have a lot of memories for From Dusk Till Dawn.
I don't like it.
You don't like the movie?
I'm not a big fan. It's all right though. We can disagree sometimes.
So, well, no, go ahead and say your bullshit stuff so we can make fun of you.
No, it's just sort of a tale of two movies to me. And I think I could have dug either one in full, but mashed together that way, it's just, I just don't enjoy watching it. I'm not like trying to pick out bad performances or anything. I just, and I'm also never really been into like zombie vampire stuff either. Like,
right.
So I think that was part of the turnoff for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those. If you can't get on board with the two different movies thing, then it's you're like, what the hell am I watching? And especially if you don't get into vampires and stuff like that, and yeah, for sure, I can see that.
I think I only saw it like one time, and I remember liking like the first half a lot more than the second half.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And that was the kind of breakout feature performance for Clooney, wasn't it? At least in terms of
it was
like being a badass, right?
It definitely was one of the first movies he did. He was not. I don't think he was away from ER yet, because I believe The Peacemaker was the movie that he made when he was away from ER.
Yeah,
when he first got away from that. But yeah, he was getting there, because The Peacemaker came out the next year. But yeah, From Dusk Till Dawn was something that showed what you could get from Clooney when he's having fun and everything.
Yeah, the super cool badass that I guess kind of set the stage for Danny Ocean and his character in Out of Sight, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't know. I mean, I really liked his performance in that, but like a lot of the movies that he tried to do post ER. Before Out of Sight and everything, with I didn't know what kind of actor we were getting, because Peacemaker wasn't a very good movie. It's not a very memorable movie. But and then we got Batman and Robin also that same year, 97. Clooney was known for that head bob and all that. That's what a lot of times people would talk about his performances. Like, that guy can't stop shaking his head, man. But then Out of Sight comes out, and Soderbergh was like, yeah, you're going to stop doing that. And that was his first real good performance.
Then Oh Brother, I think, really just sealed the deal on, yeah, he's a real actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But, and I guess one other thing we can talk about Tarantino, we didn't really talk too much about True Romance. He wrote the screenplay for that. That's basically what started his career, was True Romance. He sold that script, and he was able to make Reservoir Dogs based off of that.
And I love True Romance. I probably watched that movie 30 times in college.
Yeah, same here. True Romance is just one of those. That's another really fun movie. A lot of quotable dialogue in it.
Yeah.
Tony Scott directed it, which is that's the weird Tony Scott Quentin Tarantino connection that we got there in the mid '90s with that and Crimson Tide. I would never put those two people together and think they could make great movies, but they did.
Yeah.
But True Romance is just balls out insane. Gary Oldman, that great performance at the beginning, and Christian Slater, who's just at the top of his 90s Christian Slaterness in that. Every time Christian Slater says something, I'm like wrapped up in it, because he has, he talks like this, and he's always like, hey man, I just love Slater back in those days, but there's so many great little either cameos or small roles. James Gandolfini and Brad Pitt and Chris Penn and Tom Sizemore and all these guys are just it rounds out that movie. Bronson Pinchot's in it.
Yeah.
There's so many little, I love movies like that. We haven't seen anything really like that since.
It's violent as hell too, just like most of Tarantino's own directed stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but you have that scene. Isn't that the scene with Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper?
Yes. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Incredibly tense and awesome dialogue and everything.
Oh, yeah. We've used it a couple of times in outtakes too. That's just, also, if you're talking about obsessed with the N-word, that's what that whole speech ends up being by the end of it. But it's still great, even besides that. You know what though? What's weird about True Romance? Now we're talking in context of that. I think back in I think the movie came out in 94, 95. It was 95, I think. No, it was 93. True Romance came out in 93. That little cut down of Christopher Walken's character is so great. But now when you watch it, you're sitting there going, wow, maybe I shouldn't have laughed so much about the ending of that. It's like back in 93, it felt okay. Now it's in a different context. It's like, oh, Dennis Hopper, you're kind of racist, man.
What you're saying is
surprising thing about Dennis Hopper.
Racist is what you're saying.
What's that?
Nothing. I just made a joke calling you racist.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm definitely racist, but
everybody knows.
Yeah, everybody knows that. So it's okay for me to be racist.
Again, it's the name of the new podcast that's out, everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. New name, N-word, on iTunes. So do we have any Q&A type stuff?
I'm searching through the hashtag Sincast right now, which is what I ask people to submit questions through. There's one or two I've seen that are pretty interesting. Somebody asked about the story behind the recurring sins, like if there's a story behind skip or roll credits. And roll credits is one I do have a small story on. That's just something my friend Josh and I used to say back in the mid-90s when we would go watch every movie that came out. And whenever any characters in the movie would say the name of the movie, we would go, roll credits. And it's just one of those things that is from my past that I incorporated into what we're doing now, and I still think it's pretty funny. But I was watching an interview with Penn Jillette once, and he was talking about this film club he had in the 70s or 80s in New York with a bunch of famous people that would come watch movies with him. And whenever they saw somebody in the movie say the name of the movie, the entire audience would stand up and applaud. So I love that. Completely separately, I came up with a similar joke to something that a genius like Penn Jillette came up with. So.
It's funny, the roll credits thing. I don't think we had fully incorporated it yet, but I remember in Insidious when the Lin Shaye character says Insidious. I wrote, hey, that's the title of the movie, and that's what goes in the video. And then later on, we started doing more roll credits. We may have just started it, but I didn't quite incorporate it into that script yet.
Are there any other recurring ones?
Well, the Skip one, the only thing I remember about Skip was that it started with A-Team. And it's not because A-Team was in particular just a movie that felt like I needed to skip so much from it or whatever. It's not, I mean, sure, it's not a very good movie, but for some reason, it really bothers me, especially in movies like this, where you have a guy who knows a main female character that they meet randomly somehow, like they're just hanging out on a military base, and Jessica Biel shows up, and of course Jessica Biel and Bradley Cooper have been dating before. They've had a relationship before the movie actually started or whatever. And so inevitably, whenever you have this situation, you have a couple that has to fight about something, and they're not even together anymore. It's always like, well, I guess that's why you left me, blah, 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 that type of thing. So every time I hear that, I'm just like, I don't want to see this. You're going to get together anyway by the end of it because of something stupid anyway. So skip. That's basically what came into my head when that first came about. And I think we used the skip thing like 3 times in A-Team because every time Bradley Cooper and Jessica Biel show up, they have to talk about something that happened in the past, and it's just annoying. But other recurring ones, what are some other ones?
A lot of them are just based on common, like the Prometheus School of Running Away is a recurring joke, but I think everybody knows what we're referencing there at this point. Right,
and the scene does not contain a lap dance, which we don't do much anymore. That was in that very first video, and that was basically, you can tell the story on that. I think we did before, but you can go ahead and tell it again.
Might as well put it on record.
Yep.
So the idea was basically in my mind, was to come up with a way to say that we thought, or the Sin voice guy thought Emma Stone was attractive. And long, long ago, there was a movie I saw a trailer for, and the way I remember it, and this may just be made up, I don't know, it was so long ago, but the trailer had a clip of a lap dance, and then the movie did not. And so what I came up with was, let's just say when Emma Stone's sitting on that picnic table, this scene doesn't have a lap dance. Like, it should, but it doesn't. And as we went along, it just kind of started to feel a little too pervy. Because we don't really go to strip clubs and get lap dances, and we wouldn't really advocate they be in movies.
Right. Well, and that movie was Death Proof. I mean, Death Proof was in the Grindhouse version of Death Proof. Gets to the Vanessa Ferlito scene where she's about to give a lap dance to Kurt Russell, and it cuts. It says "scene deleted" or whatever in the Grindhouse version. Okay. But when you go to Death Proof, the actual regular version of it, it's in there, and it's pretty phenomenal.
It's all related.
Yeah, it's all related. But yeah, I mean, I think another reason for it was just that we were trying to come up with sort of an asshole way of saying that even though this is not technically a flaw in the movie, it's technically a flaw for me that I don't get to see that in the movie. So it sort of became a springboard for a lot of other, like, a lot of times we'll just write something garbage in there because it's something that we personally wanted to see in the movie. And it wasn't there, and we were upset.
Coming up. Actually, it will already be out by the time this podcast comes out, but it's in Fantastic Four, that sin about me wishing the monkey came back with powers and rampaged the earth.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a sin on the movie. That movie's plenty terrible on its own, but yeah, we do that plenty, where we just go, this would have been better if it took a left turn here and did this.
Right, right.
Anyway, nowadays the girl is hot sins are generally stuff like so-and-so's not my girlfriend in the scene, or what have you. And I think there's still people that think that's too sexist, even though we're playing a character, but who cares?
Yeah, exactly. Those people can just get over it.
Well, and if those people are listening to this podcast, they've already tuned out because we're pretty pervy in this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, not terribly, but I don't think we've been terribly pervy today.
No, I mean, we could definitely be worse for sure.
And
have been in the past.
Definitely. Is there anything music video sins related that you guys write a bunch?
Well, speaking of pervy, we do have a J-Lo Iggy Azalea booty video coming out here soon, and it's just 3 minutes of ass. So, like, if for whatever we lacked in perviness in this podcast, I promise you, we will make up for it in that video.
I was talking to somebody, this was several months ago, but we were talking about the difference between the writing on the main channel and you guys' channel. And I was like, well, music video sins are a little bit more pervy than ours. The guy goes, a little bit.
Well, and it comes from the fact that music videos are almost, they're 3 or 4 minutes condensed, and they're almost always selling the artist. And the artist, if it's female, they're going to put her in, these revealing clothes and all that. And it's, you don't have a real story. You have a whole bunch of images that are basically like, boy, this girl's hot, isn't she? She's hot. Boy, she's hot.
That's such an unfair criticism. Like watch any music video ever created, and the theme is always sex. So like,
right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're just commenting on what's taking place. So,
well, and I think that if the Fast and Furious movies were 5 minutes long, which would be great, that's all it would be.
Yeah.
It would be asses and cars.
Exactly.
And there's a part in Furious 7 where there's a girl who, one of the, the starting, whatever you call those girls that start the race. I'm sure they have a role. They have, something like continuity girl in the James Bond movie. But like, that girl, they show her ass like 3 times for no reason.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, here it is a really long time. And then finally the race starts.
Well, I think we even commented on that in our video, right?
Yeah, it was about. We said that her ass has her own agent, and because it was in there for like 15 times.
My favorite one from that stuck out is the Nicki Minaj Anaconda video.
Oh yeah,
and it actually ended up being the caption to the screenshot or the thumbnail on the YouTube thing, but it's just her in this perfect position of like, sticking her ass out in the back and everything. And the caption is, "Excuse me, miss, your asshole is showing."
Yeah. That was definitely Jay's.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And that's coming back every once in a while too. It's
well,
like, excuse me.
It's so blatant, and that's so true. Like there are, it's frankly, it's kind of gross, to be honest with you. It's just so, it's an ongoing joke. You guys were talking about this earlier, but it's an ongoing joke that kind of keeps popping up in every single music video. So we've actually got comments in the past from people who watch the videos where they're just like, "Oh yes, they were on it again. There it is." So
yeah, they would have been disappointed if you didn't talk about the ass.
Yeah.
If people think we're pervy now, they should see the stuff that we cut out of these things,
including that video you were just talking about.
What's that?
Including that Nicki Minaj video. I don't want to go into what we cut, but there was a real raunchy one that we cut.
Yeah.
There's another one here I thought might be interesting for a little wrap up discussion, and it's have you ever seen a movie that you thought was bad and then seen it again later and liked it? And then
I know that's happened. Go ahead and try to think of one, but I know that's happened before.
For me, the best example is Kids in the Hall Brain Candy.
Oh yeah, good one.
And I was a big fan of their show and their sketches, and I went into the movie pretty blind, and it was just so shocking. It was almost the way I remember viewing the South Park movie. Like, I was almost so shocked the first time through that my brain didn't catch up to be able to enjoy it.
Right.
And then, like 6 months later, a friend brings it home from the video store, and I watch it again, and I died laughing. I was in hysterics.
Especially the big musical number, that always gets me. I always think that's the funniest thing in that movie, that big musical number, and because he's like, I'm gay, I'm gay, that time. I love that. I love that whole thing. You're talking about comedies. There's a lot of comedies that over the years that I didn't like the first time, and I think a lot of times it's because I would watch comedies by myself because I was a projectionist. And you just sit there and watch a comedy. A lot of times you're like, that's pretty funny or whatever. So I thought Anchorman was okay when I first watched it. But then everybody started talking about Anchorman, and I was like, did I miss something in that movie? And then I watch it again, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see what everybody's laughing about now. It's a completely different set of circumstances when you watch the movie in a theater at like midnight with nobody in there. As opposed to the 7:00 Friday night sold out movie.
Yeah, isn't it the total opposite for dramas? Because I was maybe not in the theater, but I was thinking Deer Hunter was mine.
That's a movie I still don't like.
Well, I saw it, almost distracted the first time that I saw it. I was kind of coming in and out, and it wasn't, my primary focus and everything. And that's a movie that probably demands your attention. And so I watched it actually by myself later on and just kind of like dived in. And it's one of those. This is another podcast topic of it's a movie that I love that I would never want to see again.
Right.
And
That's a good topic. Somebody write that down.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that because there are movies like Deer Hunter and Blade Runner, that just for whatever reason, however many times you give it a chance. Now, I like Blade Runner. Okay, I'm not as huge as a lot of people are on it, and there's still some people who don't like it, even no matter how many times they watch it. But Deer Hunter, man, I've watched that movie 3 times, and I never once have I thought it was good. It's one of those movies that I feel like it gets a lot of praise because of the Russian roulette scene.
Yeah, it's an intense scene.
It's intense. It really is. It's the best part of the movie. But everything leading up to that, I'm just kind of like, oh man, this is, it's like Pittsburgh Steelworkers, and
I think it's just because you hate the Steelers that you hate this movie.
Yeah, it's part of the Steelers thing too, because they're all Steelers fans and they're awful people. They're all awful people. Jay, do you have a movie that you didn't like?
Basically, like any Tom Cruise film up front, and then I go back and watch it. I'm like, God, it's good. It's something about him, I think. Like, I don't want to like it, and then I'll go back and I'm like, oh, Mission Impossible. That was like a jerk off action film, and I'm like, oh, cool, all right, I'm in. But one in particular, like Vanilla Sky, like I didn't really care for it up front.
Another good one there for that kind of discussion. Whether you can like it after 4 or 5 times of not liking it, but go ahead.
Well, I just think I don't know, maybe it's a different time in my life where I was like, oh, I kind of understand this now. Maybe I was sober the second time. I'm not sure. I have no idea. But it's a tough question. So whoever asked it, I think you kind of.
Then you have a movie, like, for me, like a movie that you watch frequently, maybe because you want to like it more than you do, but you don't hate it. And like Cloud Atlas for me, I've seen that movie 3 times, and I'm still dead center. Like,
yeah,
there are things about it I love, and there are things about it I think are terrible, and they just coexist, and I'm going to have to accept it one day.
Yeah, and that's basically what that movie is, isn't it? It's a lot of good and a lot of terrible.
Yeah.
And there's no bringing down the good, and there's no bringing up the terrible.
Yeah.
And that's a fascinating movie to talk about.
Oh yeah. I saw it twice in theaters. I wanted to like it so bad.
Yeah. But that one's a good one. I actually didn't like The Departed too much when I first watched it. I fell into a trap with The Departed because it was Scorsese and I was expecting mind-blowing Scorsese movie. And when I first watched it, I was like, okay, it's okay, I guess, whatever. And I liked it all right. But then I watched it again and I love it. And I've probably seen it 20 times now.
Yeah, I will never not watch that movie if it's on.
Right. Same here.
Right.
This has been the Sincast. We're doing this every Monday in case you wanted to know. I guess we're signing off. This is Chris Atkinson, Jeremy Scott, Barrett Scare.
Boo.
Yes, Barrett Share and Jay Lalonde. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out Cinemasins on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Tumblr. And be sure to visit cinemasins.com.
I don't even know what Jeremy smells like.
Better off.
But to answer your question, Jeremy smells of bergamot. With hints of vanilla.
And booze. I really wanted to talk about that movie Paul Giamatti made with Frankie Muniz.
Yeah.
I was hoping one of you guys would bring that up, actually.
Here's a forum for you to talk about Paul Giamatti and Frankie Muniz in the same movie.
Called? Was it Big Fat Liar? Was that it?
I think it was Big Fat Liar, actually.
I just remember Giamatti's covered in blue paint at some point in the movie.